Picture this, uh, a warm summer afternoon back in 1982, a small town in Utah, the kind of place where kids could just roam free,
Right.
playing in backyards that felt like extensions of their homes. It was the kind of place where you didn't think twice about letting your kids run out to the neighborhood playground. But for the Runion family, that sense of security was shattered in an instant. Today we're taking a deep dive into the disappearance and murder of 5-year-old Rachel Runion. It's a case that has haunted investigators and the community for over 4 decades.
Yeah, what's really striking about this case is how it just underscores that vulnerability we all feel when it comes to our children's safety. It's that parent's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
Your child vanishes from what you believe to be a safe space, and you're left with more questions than answers.
Exactly, and we're going to try to unpack some of those questions today. We're drawing on eyewitness accounts, investigative reports, and interviews with Rachel's family. It's a story with so many twists and turns, shifting suspect descriptions, the appearance of black roses on Rachel's grave, and even a theory about a snuff film that terrified the nation.
The snuff film angle is really intriguing. It reflects the anxieties of the time. It was a period where the concept of these horrific acts being filmed and distributed, it was gaining traction in the public consciousness, adding a chilling layer to an already tragic case.
Absolutely. So let's go back to August 26, 1982, the day Rachel disappeared. She was playing in her backyard with her 2 brothers, 5-year-old Justin and little Nathan, who was just a toddler. Their yard had a gate that led directly to a playground, a setup that probably felt incredibly convenient and safe for the family.
That detail about the gate is so important. It creates this sense of normalcy, routine, a world where danger feels distant. And then in a flash, everything changes.
Rachel's mom, Elaine, was inside preparing lunch. She called the boys in, and at first only Justin and Nathan came running back. It wasn't until Elaine realized Rachel wasn't with them that the panic set in. Can you imagine that moment? That sinking feeling as you realize your child is missing?
Oh, it's every parent's worst nightmare. It's a moment where time probably just stopped for Elaine. And then that desperate search for answers begins.
Elaine immediately questioned Justin. And, at just 5 years old, he had to recount this terrifying experience. He told his mom that a man approached them at the playground, offering to take them to a nearby store called Bob Coe's for ice cream. Little Rachel, trusting and innocent, went along with the man, her brothers trailing behind.
The ice cream lure, it's such a classic tactic used by predators. It preys on a child's innocence.
Yeah.
Their love of treats, making them more vulnerable to manipulation.
It's heartbreaking. Justin described how the man then grabbed Rachel, put her over his shoulder, and told the boys they'd be right back. Rachel was screaming, fighting to get away, but the man drove off with her.
And despite the trauma of that moment, Justin's account, those details he was able to provide, became the initial roadmap for the investigation.
Elaine immediately called her husband Jeff, and then 911. The small town's police force was suddenly thrust into this frantic search for a missing child. Roadblocks were set up and investigators started gathering eyewitness accounts. Both Justin and another child who was at the playground described the suspect. They said he was a tall, black man between 30 and 35 years old with a mustache. They also remembered a crucial detail. The man was driving a blue Ford Pinto with wood grain paneling.
That car description, as specific as it was, would become a focal point of the investigation, a piece of the puzzle that would resurface years later.
And while the police were doing their part, the Runion family wasn't simply sitting back and waiting. They were proactive, organizing fundraisers to increase the reward money, distributing flyers with Rachel's picture everywhere, even getting her photo printed on buckets of chicken at a local KFC. It's a testament to their determination, their refusal to let Rachel's case fade from public view.
It speaks to the power of community as well, how people came together to support the Runions in their desperate search.
But as days turned into weeks, the leads dried up. There were no ransom demands, and the police started to fear that Rachel might have been taken out of state. The Runions even appeared on the Today Show, pleading for any information that could bring their daughter home. They had to confront the possibility that Rachel might have been sold into an illegal adoption ring, or even worse, a human trafficking network.
These were the dark possibilities that haunted parents in that era. Scenarios that added a layer of terror to an already unimaginable situation.
Then on September 19th, almost a month after Rachel vanished, the Runions received a devastating phone call from their bishop. A small child's body had been found.
It was a heartbreaking turning point in the case. The hope of finding Rachel alive was extinguished, and the focus shifted to identifying the remains and finding her killer. The discovery was made by a family who was hiking in a mountain canyon about 20 miles from Sunset. It was a remote area, adding another layer of mystery to the case.
And the body was found in a stream bound with nylon rope and badly decomposed.
The condition of the body, it speaks to the passage of time, the elements taking their toll, making that identification process that much more difficult.
It was a heartbreaking task, but Elaine was able to confirm it was Rachel, recognizing her clothing and a chipped tooth.
That detail about the chipped tooth, it's such a small thing, but in this case, it carried so much weight. It helped bring a measure of closure to the identification process, a confirmation amidst the tragedy.
The cause of death sadly couldn't be determined due to the decomposition, but the nylon rope was a clear indication of foul play. Rachel's funeral was held a few days later, and you can only imagine the grief that engulfed the community, the weight of this loss pressing down on everyone.
It's in these moments, in the aftermath of such a tragedy, that a community's true character shines through, how they rally around the grieving family, how they seek answers, how they work to ensure that something like this never happens again.
And that's exactly what happened in Sunset. Rachel's death became a catalyst for change, a turning point in how the community approached child safety. Parents started creating ID packets for their kids. Fingerprinting drives became commonplace, and schools implemented stranger danger programs. It was a painful legacy, but one that undoubtedly helped protect countless other children.
It's a testament to the Runion's strength as well, their ability to channel their grief into action, to advocate for change that could prevent other families from experiencing their unimaginable pain.
But even as the community grappled with the loss of Rachel, the investigation into her murder continued. And it took a strange, unsettling turn when black roses started appearing on her grave.
That detail is so chilling, so symbolic. Was it the killer, leaving a macabre calling card? Or was it someone trying to taunt the family, the police? Or was it just a morbid coincidence, adding an eerie layer to an already heartbreaking situation?
The police investigated the roses, of course, but they never found out who was leaving them. It remains a mystery to this day, a haunting footnote in Rachel's story. Meanwhile, investigators were exploring other angles, including a possible connection to a serial killer who was active in the area around the same time, a man named Arthur Gary Bishop.
Bishop's crimes were horrific, the kind that leave a community reeling. The similarities to Rachel's case were certainly there, and it made sense for investigators to explore any possible link.
But Bishop denied involvement in Rachel's murder, and ultimately no concrete evidence tied him to the case. So the black roses remained unexplained. The Bishop connection faded, and the investigation seemed to hit a wall. Then, in 1985, a tip came in that reignited the case. Someone found a disturbing message scrawled on a restroom wall in a laundromat near the Runion's home. The message read, "Beware, I'm still at large. I killed the little Runion girl. Remember, beware." And beneath the message, there was a drawing of an upside-down cross with 3 6s around it.
That message, with its satanic imagery, it tapped into some of the deepest fears of that era, It injected a new level of anxiety into the case, fueling speculation and raising concerns about ritualistic crimes.
The police launched a full investigation into the message, but they couldn't determine who wrote it. There was no security footage at the laundromat, and despite the chilling nature of the message, it didn't bring them any closer to finding Rachel's killer.
It's almost as if this message was meant to sow chaos, to spread fear, rather than offer a genuine clue.
And then in 1989, another bombshell dropped. A woman contacted the police, claiming she knew who killed Rachel, her own brother.
This is where the case takes a sharp turn into the realm of the macabre, delving into the terrifying world of snuff films.
The woman claimed to have inside knowledge about a snuff film that documented Rachel's murder. She even agreed to work with the police, helping them try to buy a copy of the film from her brother.
This must have been a high-stakes operation for the police, relying on the testimony of an informant whose motives and reliability were unclear.
It was a long shot, and sadly it failed. The police tried to purchase the film 3 times, but each attempt fell apart. Eventually, the woman was charged with obstructing justice and recanted most of her story. But despite the lack of evidence, the snuff film theory lingered, fueled in part by an episode of Unsolved Mysteries that focused on Rachel's case.
Unsolved Mysteries was a cultural phenomenon, bringing cold cases into living rooms across the country, and while it generated hundreds of tips in Rachel's case, none of them led to a definitive breakthrough.
The case went cold again. The answers remaining elusive for decades. But in 2019, a private investigator named Jason Jensen decided to take a fresh look at the evidence, hoping to uncover something that had been missed.
This is where we see the importance of fresh perspectives, new eyes looking at old evidence, questioning assumptions, and exploring every possible angle.
Jensen had been working on another cold case in Utah, where the initial suspect description had been of a black man, but the actual perpetrator turned out to be Hispanic. It made him wonder if something similar might have happened in Rachel's case. He reached out to Elaine Runion and asked if it was possible that her son Justin might have misidentified the suspect's race all those years ago.
It's a fascinating question, and one that speaks to the complexities of memory, especially when it comes to children who have experienced trauma.
Elaine talked to Justin, who is now an adult, and he admitted that he'd never been completely comfortable with the original composite sketch. He wasn't sure if the man was black, remembering him as having a dark complexion. But he also revealed a crucial detail he'd never mentioned before. The suspect had a pronounced gap in his mustache.
That detail, the mustache gap, it's like a lightning bolt in the case. It's a specific, unique characteristic that could potentially help narrow down the suspect pool significantly.
Jensen, armed with this new information, had a new composite sketch created, incorporating the mustache gap. This new sketch, along with the possibility that the suspect might not have been black, was circulated, and it quickly led to a bombshell tip. A woman contacted Jensen saying her family had always suspected her uncle, who we'll call Lane, of being involved in Rachel's disappearance.
And suddenly, a new suspect emerges, a figure from the past, who fits certain aspects of the case in a chillingly precise way.
The woman told Jensen that her father had considered reporting Lane to the police back in 1982, but he'd been talked out of it by his wife, who thought he was being prejudiced. It's a detail that speaks to the complexities of family dynamics, the weight of secrets, and the potential for missed opportunities in an investigation.
It also raises questions about how biases, both conscious and unconscious, can influence the way we perceive information and make decisions, even in these life-or-death situations.
Lane had a criminal history, including convictions for theft, assault, and disturbingly child sexual abuse. He'd been in and out of prison throughout his life, and crucially, he would have been out of prison at the time of Rachel's abduction.
That criminal history, especially the child sexual abuse charges, immediately puts Lane on the radar as a potential suspect in a child abduction case.
And here's where the pieces really start to fall into place. Lane owned a blue Ford Pinto with wood grain paneling, the exact type of car witnesses described back in 1982. He lived close to the Runions, and his family's house was just a few blocks from the police station, which might explain why the car was never spotted during the initial investigation.
The proximity to the crime scene, the criminal history, it all starts to paint a very disturbing picture.
And there's one more detail that connects Lane to the case. He was known to frequent Bob Coe's, the store the kidnapper mentioned to the children.
It's that small detail, that familiarity with the location used to lure the children, that adds another layer of credibility to Lane's potential involvement.
Unfortunately, Lane had died 2 years before his niece came forward with her tip. But Jensen, convinced that he was on the right track, contacted Lane's daughter and requested a DNA sample to compare to evidence found at the crime scene. It was a long shot, but it was the best chance they had of finally getting some answers.
And it speaks to the advancements in forensic science. The ability to potentially solve decades-old crimes with technology, that wasn't available back then.
In 2020, the DNA samples were sent to a forensic lab in Utah, and the Runion family was left in a state of agonizing anticipation, waiting for results that could finally bring them some closure.
It's a wait that must have felt like an eternity, a mix of hope and dread, the weight of 40 years of unanswered questions hanging in the balance.
After 40 years, the Runion family is still waiting for those DNA results. It's a reminder that even with new leads and advancements in technology, the pursuit of justice can be a long and agonizing process. But, as we've seen in this deep dive into Rachel's case, it's a process that's driven by hope, perseverance, and an unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth, no matter how much time has passed.
And for anyone listening who might have information about a cold case, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem, please remember that your voice could be the key to unlocking a mystery and bringing closure to a family that has waited far too long for answers.
If this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, be sure to check out our website for more information about Rachel's case and other captivating explorations of real-life mysteries. And don't forget to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more thought-provoking content. Thanks for listening.